The town of Greystone Bay didn't appear on most maps anymore. Tucked against a wind-scoured coast in the north, it lay half forgotten, its population dwindled to hardy fishermen, reclusive artists, and old families who never left. The kind of place where gulls screamed louder than gossip, where the sea gnawed at the cliffs like a restless beast. And just off those cliffs stood the lighthouse, tall, rusting, and dark since 1973. That was when the last keeper, Thomas Carraway, vanished. People said he left a final log full of nonsense. "Voices in the static," he wrote. "The light doesn't shine into the fog, it shines into something else." He'd left no trace, just a neatly folded uniform and a half-eaten apple in the lantern room. Since then, the lighthouse had stood abandoned, sealed by the Coast Guard, overtaken by gulls and storms, until the signal began. It started one rainy night in April. Mrs. Delaney, who ran the antique shop and still owned a ham radio from her late husband, was the first to hear it. A low, whispering frequency at 87.9 FM. No station should have been there, just dead air. But the static began to pulse, rhythmic, patterned. Beneath it, a warbling hum that rose and fell like breath. Then the voice. Faint, male, hollow. "Come home. Water remembers. Come see." The next day, Mrs. Delaney walked straight into the ocean. No note, no cry. Just removed her shoes at low tide and stepped into the surf, arms at her sides. They never found her body. Within the week, 3 more had gone. 2 teens with a shortwave app and an old man known for beachcombing with a portable radio. Always after dusk. Always after hearing the signal. Panic stirred like storm clouds. Sheriff Nolan tried to track the signal. He brought in old tech, range meters, even a retired radio operator from the next town. It all led back to the lighthouse, sealed, silent, and dead as it had been for 50 years. And yet it broadcast. Marla Winslow didn't believe in ghosts, not in voices from beyond or songs sung by the sea, but she believed in patterns, and this was a pattern. She'd grown up in Greystone. Bay then left for 10 years to study acoustics and signal theory. When her mother passed last winter, she'd returned to settle affairs and found herself staying longer than planned, drawn in by the strange comfort of salt air and solitude. But when the disappearances began, something old stirred in her. A need to understand, to map the signal, to translate the unknown. She wasn't alone. There was Jonah Bell, the librarian's son-turned-conspiracy podcaster, with a portable rig of hacked gear and a relentless curiosity. And Rachel Dunn, a marine biologist whose own brother had vanished the week before after claiming he'd heard something calling through the tide. The 3 formed a strange alliance, skeptic, theorist, and scientist, bound by grief and the signal. On the 7th night, they met atop the cliffs across from the lighthouse, each carrying equipment, dressed in layers against the wind. "It's active now," Jonah said, adjusting the dials on a battered receiver. 87.9, clear as day. He turned the volume up. Static. Then a swell of sound, like cello strings played underwater. A pause. And then, unmistakably, "Home! Not lost. Not drowned. Remembered," Marla shivered. "That's no echo. That's not a loop or rebroadcast. It's responsive." Rachel looked toward the lighthouse, its silhouette, jagged and wrong, against the dusk. "We need to get inside," she said. They found the old service trail by lantern light, slippery with moss and lined with thorny brush. The gate had rusted through long ago. By the time they reached the lighthouse base, the wind had picked up, howling like a wounded thing. Jonah picked the lock on the door, more rust than metal, and pushed it open. The air inside smelled of salt and rot. The walls were streaked with mildew, and the spiral stairs groaned with every step. Up they climbed, hearts hammering in time, with the pulse of the signal which now came not from their radios, but from the very structure itself. The sound buzzed in their bones. The lantern room was intact. Dust coated the controls, but the signal emitter, a crude metal box with coils and switches, glowed faintly. It shouldn't have had power. There was no generator, no connection. "What the hell?" Marla whispered, reaching out. Her fingers brushed the surface, and the signal surged. The room flickered with violet light, and for a moment the windows showed not the coast below, but something else. Endless water, black and gleaming, with pinpricks of white light far beneath. And floating there, figures, human-shaped, drifting in stillness, watching. Marla yanked her hand back. The vision vanished. Rachel backed toward the stairs, eyes wide. "Did you see that?" Jonah was pale. "They're not dead. The ones who walked into the sea." "No," Marla said softly. "They were taken." She looked back at the humming machine, at the lighthouse that shouldn't broadcast, at the voices that spoke in forgotten tones. "We're not just receiving a signal," she said. "We're being answered." The next morning, Greystone Bay was gripped by unease. Word of Marla's trespass into the lighthouse spread quickly. Someone had seen lanterns moving near the cliffs, claimed they'd heard the strange signal louder than ever, pulsing like a heartbeat in the fog. Sheriff Nolan showed up on Marla's porch before noon. "You shouldn't have gone in there," he said, voice low, gaze fixed on the horizon. "That place was sealed for a reason." Marla met his eyes. "People are walking
into the ocean and not coming back. You think staying outside will stop it?"
Nolan sighed and leaned against the porch rail. "You saw something, didn't you?" Marla hesitated, then nodded. "Figures in the water. They weren't dead. They were waiting." He ran a hand down his weathered face. "Back in '73, when Caraway disappeared, I was just a deputy. I remember the way he talked that last month. He said the sea was broadcasting memories. Said he could hear things in the fog. We thought he'd lost it." Marla's voice was steady. "Maybe
he didn't."
That night, Jonah arrived at Marla's place with something new, a spectral analyzer modified to record and graph audio anomalies. "If it's a signal from another dimension," he said, "maybe we can visualize it, see if there's structure, or language we're not picking up with ears alone." Rachel came too, pale and distracted. She'd been combing tide records and noticed a disturbing pattern. "The signal pulses sync with moon cycles," she said. "Each new moon, it gets stronger, and tomorrow night is the strongest in 50 years. "Like it's building to something?" Marla asked. "Or opening," Rachel said. "A door, maybe." They returned to the lighthouse. The walk was darker this time, no moonlight to guide them. The wind had stilled, but the air felt charged, like the moment before a thunderclap. Inside the lantern room, Jonah hooked up the analyzer to the signal source. The device buzzed, stuttered, then began to draw lines of shifting waveforms that almost looked like script, curves and angles, repeating patterns. "It's a language," Jonah breathed. "A written one." Marla leaned closer. "Can you isolate a segment and translate it?" He nodded and set the device to repeat a short burst. A filtered voice emerged.
"Clearer now. You are remembered. You are not lost. You belong." A sudden rumble shook the lighthouse. The glass in the lantern panes trembled. And then a scream, far off. Human. Rachel was already moving, bolting down the spiral staircase. The others followed. Outside, they found a figure staggering up the beach, soaked to the bone, crawling on hands and knees. It was Kyle Dunn, Rachel's brother. Rachel
fell beside him, sobbing. "Kyle, oh my God, we thought—" He grabbed her wrist with trembling fingers. His eyes were wide, his skin unnaturally cold. "They're calling more," he gasped. "They showed me, below. It's not water, not—"
"Really?"
"It's memory, echoes, layers of everything that's ever drowned, and it's waking up." Then he passed out. Back at Marla's home, they bundled Kyle in blankets and laid him by the fire. He drifted in and out of consciousness, muttering fragments. The signal is a bridge. Time isn't straight. The lighthouse turns inward. When he finally stabilized, he whispered a phrase that chilled them all. "They want to come through." Rachel clutched his hand. "Who, Kyle? What are they?" He looked at her, eyes unfocused. "They were us, long ago, before the sea forgot." The group fell silent. Marla stood, pacing. "The signal is a transmission and a key. A way to open something. If the next full-strength pulse is tomorrow night, we need to understand it before then."
"Or stop it? But how?" Jonah asked. "Destroy the equipment?" Rachel shook her head. "It's not just the lighthouse. The signal's part of the land now, the sea. It's in the airwaves, in the tide patterns." Marla stared into the
fire. "Then we don't stop the signal, we follow it." Jonah blinked. "You mean go into the other side? If Kyle came back, it means there's a way through and a way out. If we understand it, we might be able to sever the link or trap it." Rachel frowned. "You'd be risking your mind, your body, your life." Marla looked up. "So were the ones who vanished. It's time we faced what they saw." They spent the next day preparing. Jonah scavenged signal boosters and insulated transmitters. Rachel calculated tide depths and moonrise. Kyle, though still weak, sketched what he remembered. Twisted ruins beneath black water, beams of impossible. Light, a vast presence that hovered over memories like a god of drowned dreams. Marla wrote a short letter, folded it into her pocket. When the sun fell, they returned to the lighthouse one last time. The signal was already humming, louder than ever. The machine in the lantern room glowed with pulsing energy. The analyzer showed wild, beautiful patterns, spiraling like fractals, moving like thought. Jonah handed Marla a modified headset, wired to a fail-safe beacon. "If something happens, trigger this, and we pull you back." She nodded, heart pounding. Rachel placed a hand on her arm. "Find the source, understand it. And if you can—" "Close the door," Marla finished. She stepped forward and laid her hand on the signal emitter. The room vanished in light. Marla floated. There was no up or down, no sky, no earth, only an endless ocean that glowed from within. Light shimmered through the water like threads of thought, and all around her were shapes, human, nearly, but translucent, slow-moving, as if trapped in dream. And the sound. Not just the signal, deeper, older than that. A harmony beneath the static. Like a song composed of grief and longing, sung by something that remembered every soul lost to the sea. "You are seen," a voice said, not
in her ears, but inside her. Marla turned, though she had nobody to turn with, and the landscape shifted.
Now she stood, no, drifted, through corridors of shipwreck suspended mid-sink, a schoolroom caught in amber, a hospital room under tide, memories preserved like artifacts glowing faintly with presence. Her breath caught. This place, it was made of memory. The voice again. "You seek to close the door, but it was never a door. It was a mirror. Before her, a shape coalesced, tall, limber, cloaked in seawater. It had no face, but many voices. We did not build the bridge, you did. Every forgotten name, every lost child, every signal unanswered. Marla's voice was steady, though she wasn't sure how she spoke. What are you? We are what remains, the shape said. You call it death, but it is not. It is disconnection. We remember what the world forgot, and now you have remembered us. Suddenly the memories around her surged, images flashing through her like lightning. Her mother, kneeling beside her as a child with a broken wrist, the sound of her father's jazz records echoing through the halls. Jonah, wide-eyed with wonder. Rachel, weeping over her brother's return. And then, faces of those taken, Mrs. Delaney, the teenagers, even Caraway, staring at her through the fog of decades, mouth open in silent warning. They're still here, she whispered. They were never gone, the shape answered. But the longer they stay, the more they forget. Soon they will dissolve into what we are. Marla's thoughts focused. Let them go. Send them back. You open the channel. The tide now flows both ways, but balance must be kept. You want to close the signal. That means you must remain. Marla's
heart pounded. There has to be another way.
The shape tilted. There is always another way, but it will cost you. She turned, saw a flicker of light in the distance. Her friends, the real world, the lighthouse lantern flickering like a distant star. Marla closed her eyes and dove deeper. On the cliffs above, Jonah's voice was tight with panic. Her vitals are fading. She's been under too long. Kyle, still weak, clutched Rachel's shoulder. She's reaching the core. If she loses her memories, she won't come back. Rachel stared through binoculars at the lighthouse. We
have to trust her. Inside the lantern room, the signal pulsed violently. Machines sparked. The light turned blue. Jonah gritted his teeth. We're out of time. Marla broke through the final layer like ice. Suddenly, she stood in a chamber
that was not underwater, but built from thought. Towering pillars of coral and bone, books made of fish skin and ink that flowed on its own. And in the center, a massive lattice of antennae, curved like a seashell, humming with language. This was the origin. The broadcaster, and inside it, bound by tendrils of light, Mrs. Delaney. Her eyes blank, her mouth open in a song without sound. All the others were here too, suspended in strands of memory, drifting, dormant. Marla stepped forward.
You don't belong here, she whispered. They stirred. A piece of her mind reached for the signal, analyzed it. She felt her acoustic training surge into motion, tracing the frequency, identifying the harmonic core. It wasn't random, it
was a ritual, a sonic construct designed to anchor thought across realities. She understood. If she reversed the polarity, flipped the phase of the wave, it wouldn't shut the signal off, but it would repel the tethering force, break the connection, but it would also erase the bridge. No way back. Still she smiled, then she sang. The notes spilled from her mouth in the exact inverse of the signal, high to low, soft to loud, the waveform reversed. The world around her shook. The lattice shuddered and cracked. The tendrils retracted. The trapped figures began to wake. The shape appeared again, massive now, looming over her. You do not know what you sever, it boomed. Marla met its gaze. I know what I save. With one final breath, she released the counter signal. Light exploded. Around her, on the cliffs, the lantern room burst into white brilliance. Jonah fell back, shielding his eyes. "Something's happening!" Rachel pointed toward the shoreline. Figures were emerging from the sea, staggering, gasping, collapsing.
"On the sand! Look!" Kyle cried. "It worked! She did it!"
But the lighthouse light went out, and Marla never came back. 3 days later, the town held a quiet vigil. No more signal, no more voices. The airwaves had gone silent. The tide moved like it always had. Cold, constant, unknowable, but something
had changed. The lost were home, their memories hazy but returning. The town whispered her name like prayer. Marla Winslow, the one who listened, the one who answered.
The sea was quiet. For the first time in months, no one heard the signal. Radios returned to static. The foghorn on the docks, once mimicking the eerie rhythm of the broadcast, fell silent. It was as if the ocean had exhaled, its breath held.
No longer. Rachel stood alone at the water's edge, the hem of her coat wet, her gaze fixed on the now dark lighthouse. Beside her, the recovered walked the beach, confused, changed. Mrs. Delaney spoke in perfect clarity now, but had no memory of the past year.
The teenagers, once thought drowned, no longer recognized their own parents. They were returned, but incomplete. Rachel turned as Jonah approached, boots crunching in the damp sand. "They've all been checked," he said. "No sign of trauma. Physically, they're fine." "But mentally?" Rachel asked, voice distant. He hesitated. "It's like their minds rewound. Gaps, discontinuities, like someone hit pause and then play again." She said nothing for a long time. Then, "She's
Really gone, isn't she?"
Jonah nodded. There was no trace left in the signal architecture. Just a resonance, like the echo of a bell long after it stops ringing. They stood in silence. Finally, Rachel pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket. "She left this, told me not to read it unless..." She didn't come back. Jonah unfolded the letter and read aloud. "If you're reading this, it means I made a choice. Not out of bravery, not really. I was just the one who had to know. And sometimes, knowing
comes with a price. The signal wasn't a warning.
It was a memory, looking for someone who would listen. The ocean held too many voices. I became one more. Don't mourn me. Remember me. Keep telling the stories." That's what they were always asking for, I think. Not to come back, but to be remembered. And Jonah. "Keep building weird machines. They work better than you think." Marla Jonah's voice broke on her name. He folded the letter, pressing it to his chest. Rachel looked up at the lighthouse. "Do you think she's still out there, somewhere?" He shook his head slowly. "Not like we understand, but maybe she's part of the sea now, not lost, just transformed." In the weeks that followed, Greystone Bay changed. The lighthouse remained off, but the town no longer feared it. People began visiting its base again, leaving flowers, photos, letters to the dead. It became a kind of shrine. Rachel opened a small gallery in the heart of town, filled with sound-based installations, radio sculptures, and recovered equipment from the signal room. One exhibit played ambient water recordings interlaced with fragments of the signal, tones that no longer entranced but soothed. She titled it Echoes for Marla. Kyle took up a job with the Harbour Patrol, patrolling the waters that had once taken him. He still had dreams of cities beneath the tide, of staircases built from barnacles and bone, but each morning he woke in his own bed and Jonah kept building. He dismantled the spectral analyzer and rewired it into something new, a transmitter that didn't send messages but memories. Visitors could sit, wear a headset, and share their most powerful recollections. The machine stored them, light, sound, emotion, and projected them into the room as living echoes. He called it the Memory Lantern. One evening, Rachel returned to the lighthouse alone. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, casting the water in molten silver. She climbed to the lantern room and sat beside the cold, inert emitter. No hum, no pulse, but something tugged at her. She pulled her old radio from her bag and switched it on. Static. She adjusted the dial, slowly, carefully, through every known frequency. And then, on a frequency between the commercial bands, she heard it. Faint click. A pause, then... "Rachel!" Her breath caught. The voice was unmistakable, warm, familiar, still listening. Rachel closed her eyes, tears slipping free. "Yes," she whispered. The radio crackled again. "Good. Then I'm still
Here! The signal vanished. Just one word, just one voice, but it was enough.
The visitor arrived on a rainless Wednesday. He wore a threadbare coat, boots caked with road dust, and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low against the wind. He walked into town like he'd been there before, like the place remembered him. Rachel saw him first at the gallery. He stood before the memory lantern, not moving, listening to a child's laughter echo through the reconstructed chamber, one of the first memories ever recorded in the machine. When it ended, he turned to her. "You're Rachel, aren't you?" he asked. His voice had a radio announcer's cadence, smooth, confident, a little too precise. "I am," she said, studying him. "You're not from around here?" "No," he said. "Name's Solomon Price. I'm a researcher. Acoustic phenomena. I came for the signal." Rachel froze. "It's gone," she said. "Has been for weeks." He nodded slowly, but his gaze was sharp. "Gone, yes, but not silent. You know that, don't you?" She didn't answer. Solomon stepped closer to the radio sculpture, touching its curved antenna. "You built this to hold memories, like your friend, Marla Winslow." Rachel's chest tightened. "You knew her?" "Not personally, but I've followed her work." She spoke at a symposium on cognitive acoustics in Boston. The things she suggested, dimensional resonance, harmonic portals. Most thought she was chasing ghosts. She was. And sometimes, Solomon said softly, ghosts answer back. Rachel's eyes narrowed. "Why are you really here?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "To listen. There's residual resonance coming from your lighthouse. No overt signal, not anymore. But something beneath the noise floor. A whisper. Like someone humming in another room." Rachel stiffened. "We've had enough of people listening." "You don't understand," Solomon said, suddenly intense. "This place is an anomaly. What happened here? It's a gateway event. And those don't just end. They decay, evolve, or reopen." She turned away. "It's closed." "But what if it shouldn't be?" he pressed. "What if we're not meant to bury it, but understand it?" She rounded on him, voice low and furious. "We lost her. We barely got everyone else back. Whatever that signal was, it nearly hollowed this town out. So no, you don't get to come in and start poking at what we just sealed." Solomon stepped back, hands raised. "Fair. I'm not here to hurt anyone. But if something's still speaking, shouldn't someone be listening?" Rachel didn't reply. But that night, long after he left, she sat in the lantern room again, alone with the radio, and waited. Jonah didn't like Solomon Price. The man had a way of asking questions that felt like drills, small, precise, but with the clear intention of breaking something open. He visited Jonah's workshop 3 days in a row, claiming curiosity, asking to examine the memory lantern's schematics. "I don't share my work," Jonah said each time. Solomon just nodded. Understandable, but that didn't stop him from walking the beaches with strange instruments, small parabolic mics, glass pendulums tuned to vibration, a compact analyzer that clicked when it faced the lighthouse. Kyle saw him one night by the rocks. "You fishing for ghosts?" he asked, voice dry. Solomon looked up. "Just mapping echoes." Kyle leaned on his flashlight. "Sometimes echoes lead back to things better left quiet." Solomon smiled faintly. "That's the thing about echoes. They're proof something happened, and that it might happen again." 3 days later, it did. A boy named Evan Harrow, 11 years old, went missing after school, last seen riding his bike near the cliffs. Rachel felt her stomach plummet when she heard. She, Jonah, and Kyle were at the scene within minutes, searchlights, sweeping the grass, calling his name. The fog was thin, the sea calm, no sign of him. But then Rachel turned her portable radio to the far end of the dial and heard it again. Not the old signal, something else, a child's voice. Crying, "Hello?
Mom? I don't know where I am." Then static, then silence. Rachel's blood ran cold. She turned slowly and saw Solomon standing a dozen feet away, his own radio in hand. "You heard it too," he said quietly. Her voice cracked. "How?" Solomon looked toward the lighthouse. "The bridge is opening again."
They found Evan the next morning, curled in the dune grass, confused, chilled to the bone. He remembered a hallway filled with voices, the sound of waves, and something watching him from behind a door made of light. He remembered Rachel's voice, calling him, even though she hadn't said a word aloud. Rachel didn't sleep that night. She sat by the radio until dawn, the dial tuned to the whisper channel. Static flickered like breathing. Then, just before the sun rose, "He's not the last," a girl's voice, familiar, chilling. Rachel whispered into the air, "Marla," but the signal was gone and the fog began to roll back in. The town of Greystone Bay was no longer the same. What had once been a sleepy coastal retreat, filled with quiet streets, cheerful chatter, and the gentle rhythm of waves, had become something else entirely. The air hummed, a pulse in the walls, a faint, persistent call from the lighthouse that no one could ignore. The silence between the signal's outbursts felt like a thin sheet of glass stretched too tightly. Every whisper carried weight, and every pause held a secret. Rachel couldn't sleep. Not since Evan had been found. The town was too quiet in the wrong way. People went about their days, but there was an unease that lingered in every corner, like something had been cracked open. She walked through the foggy streets early one morning, past shuttered shops and empty cafes, toward the lighthouse. Her steps felt automatic, driven by something deeper, an urgent need to understand what was happening. At the base of the lighthouse, she found Kyle and Jonah standing near the crumbling steps, faces drawn. "Anything?" Rachel asked. Kyle shook his head. No sign of anything except more static. The radio's been picking up a hum like before, but it's not enough to trace. Just enough to keep you listening. Jonah ran a hand through his hair. "It's worse than we thought. The signal, it's not just a message. It's reaching out. It's pulling people in, one by one." Rachel's heart sank. "We can't let it happen again." "There's only one way to stop it," Kyle said, voice tight. "We have to go." Back inside the lighthouse, into the signal, Rachel shook her head. That's what Marla did, and she didn't come back. We don't have much choice, Jonah said. If we don't, the signal will spread again. There's something about this place. It's a focal point, a center of gravity. The town, the people, the memories, they're all feeding into it. Rachel turned to face him. And if we shut it down, what happens to the people who are still here, the ones who came back? Are they just forgotten again? Jonah faltered. I don't know. But what I do know is that every time someone listens to it, they lose a piece of themselves.
A part of their humanity. That's what happened to Marla, to Mrs. Delaney, to the others. The more they're exposed to it, the more they become a part of whatever that thing is. The lighthouse loomed ahead, dark and quiet in the early light.
Its tower a silhouette against the pale sky. I still don't understand why the signal came through here, Rachel said, her voice distant. What is it trying to tell us? Why does it keep reaching out? Solomon's voice interrupted their conversation, cold and composed. Because it's not just speaking to you, it's trying to bring something back. Rachel turned sharply, finding him standing at the entrance to the lighthouse. His posture was unnervingly calm, his face, like always, unreadable. What do you mean? Jonah asked, stepping forward. What are you saying? It's not just a message, Solomon replied, his eyes fixed on the dark door of the lighthouse. The signal is the voice of something else, something that existed before this world, a frequency from another dimension. And what's been happening here, what you've experienced, it's only the beginning. Rachel felt a chill creep down her spine. Another dimension? Solomon's gaze darkened. Yes. This town, this lighthouse, it's a point of convergence, a rift, if you will. And the signal? It's a bridge, a link between this world and something older, something far darker. Marla's disappearance. It wasn't a mistake. She found the way, and now it's reaching for others. Jonah's expression was grim. You're saying that Marla opened the door?
No, Solomon said, not quite. Marla was just the first. She tapped into something that's always been here, under the surface. And now it's reaching out again, pulling people in, just like Evan, just like the others. Rachel took
a step forward, her breath coming faster. We have to stop it, whatever it takes. Solomon's eyes met hers. There's a price to pay for that. You can't shut it down without destroying everything. The people who came back, the memories, this place, the very fabric of this reality could tear apart. Then we tear it, Rachel said, her voice resolute. Jonah placed a hand on her shoulder. Are you sure? Once we step inside, there's no going back. She nodded. It's the only way. They walked toward the entrance of the lighthouse together, Solomon trailing behind them as the wind picked up, swirling the fog. Around them in thick tendrils. Inside, the air was colder than it should have been. The old wooden stairs creaked under their weight as they ascended, the lantern room now dead and silent, devoid of the pulsing light that had once filled it. At the top of the tower, they found the broadcast equipment, dilapidated and broken, but the core of it still hummed faintly. There was a low vibration, like the beating of a heart, filling the room with its persistent thrum. Rachel turned to Solomon. You said it was a bridge. How do we close it? He looked at the machinery, his face a mask of concentration. You can't just cut the wires or shut it off. It's part of the landscape now, part of the town. We have to sever the connection at its source, the signal. If we can reverse the frequency, we'll dissolve the bridge, but it will take everything with it. Rachel swallowed hard. Everything. Yes, Solomon said, including the
memories of the ones who've returned. A long silence followed. "Are you sure?" Jonah asked. His voice wavered. "There's no other way?" Rachel turned to look at the sea outside the window.
The waves crashed relentlessly against the rocks below, as if calling to her. "I'm sure it's the only way to stop it." Solomon nodded grimly. "Then let's get to work." As they began to work together, adjusting frequencies and rerouting signals, Rachel felt a strange pull in her chest, as though the town itself was holding its breath, waiting for what was about to come. The signal was close, too close, and this time they weren't just listening, they were ending it. The lighthouse felt like a tomb. Rachel, Jonah, and Solomon worked in silence, each lost in their own thoughts as they maneuvered through the equipment. The hum from the transmitter had grown louder, more insistent. Every adjustment they made sent strange vibrations through the floor, like the building itself was waking up. The air crackled with tension. "I think I've isolated the core frequency," Solomon said, his voice tight. He adjusted a dial, and the hum faltered for a moment before stabilizing again. "This is it. If we reverse the polarity on this signal, it should destabilize the entire bridge." Rachel looked at him, her pulse racing. "And everything else goes with it?" He met her gaze. "Everything." There was a long pause. "We don't have time," Jonah said, his eyes dark with hesitation. "This place, it's pulling at us. Whatever we do, it's going to fight back. We can't just
turn it off."
"The more we try, the more it tries to drag us in." Rachel's hand clenched into a fist at her side. The signal, the voice, it had been so close to her, to everyone. So many times she had felt it call her, beckoning her to listen, to understand, and each time she had pushed it away. But now, the weight of that decision pressed on her. Her mind drifted back to Marla's letter, the words that still echoed in her heart. "Remember me. Keep telling the stories." The signal was more than a voice. It was a memory, and Marla had warned them. This wasn't a warning. It was a plea. "Don't mourn me. Remember me." She reached out and adjusted a lever, just a slight shift. The hum grew stronger. "Rachel?" Jonah's voice was a whisper of fear. "I'm doing it," she said, her voice steady. Solomon's eyes narrowed. "You're sure?" "Yes," she answered, her heart pounding. "This is how it ends." She flipped the final switch. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, just as she felt a strange tremor in her bones, as if the very air was charged with a terrible energy, the room was filled with the sound. A blast of static and voices, too many, all overlapping in a cacophony of despair and longing. It was the lighthouse's signal, the voices of the lost, the echoes of those who had crossed into the rift. Rachel closed her eyes and gritted her teeth, willing herself to hold steady. She heard Marla's voice again, soft, distant. "I'm
still here. Keep listening." It was fading, and then a rupture. A violent crack in the soundscape, a pulse of pure, undiluted noise, and then silence. The hum ceased. The vibrations stopped.
The lighthouse, once filled with life and echoes, fell into an eerie quiet. Rachel opened her eyes slowly, blinking as the weight in the air seemed to lift. The stillness was so deep, it felt like they were the only ones left in the world. The D signal was gone. For good. But at what cost? Rachel's breath came in shallow gasps. She turned to look at Jonah and Solomon. Both of them were standing in stunned silence, their faces pale, the weight of their actions sinking in. The air around them had changed. The heavy fog outside was no longer pressing against the lighthouse like a physical presence. The world felt clearer somehow, brighter, but also emptier, like the town had just exhaled its last breath. "We did it," Jonah said, his voice barely audible. But what?" Rachel asked. Jonah didn't answer immediately. He was staring into the distance, as though something were missing from the world outside. Slowly, he walked to the window. Rachel followed, standing beside him. What had once been a foggy, indistinct view of the coastline now seemed to stretch out infinitely. There was no more mist, no more haze, but there was something else, something different. The town was still there, but it felt hollow. Rachel turned, her stomach churning. "Where's everyone else?" She ran downstairs, but the town was eerily still. No one was out. No voices echoed on the street. Even the houses seemed abandoned, silent, closed off. Kyle appeared at the end of the street, walking slowly toward her. His expression was blank, as though he were lost in a dream. "You," Rachel began, but her voice caught. She didn't know what to say. He stopped in front of her, his eyes distant, as though seeing her through a fog. "It's gone, Rachel. All of it. All the voices." Rachel's heart skipped a beat. "But we saved you. We brought you back." Kyle shook his head slowly, his face devoid of the emotion she'd seen in him before. "No, you brought us back, but not the way you think. The lighthouse didn't just take us into the sea, it took us into the past, into a place where we were never truly gone, a place where we were lost, but never meant to return." Rachel's stomach twisted. "So what happens now?" Kyle's gaze was unreadable. "Now, we wait for the next signal." "Don't say that," she whispered. "We shut it down." "No," he said, his voice soft. "You stopped it, but the bridge isn't gone. It's only dormant." Rachel turned away from him, looking at the empty streets. She didn't know if she could stand it, the silence that stretched beyond the horizon. She had done what was all necessary. But now the town was unrecognizable, and somewhere, deep in the back of her mind, she knew the lighthouse's signal would never truly be gone. It would always be there, waiting